That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you. And look, we told you a couple weeks ago that this was a powder keg at Hallis Hall, right? We told you that this was bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and there was something going on here. And today we have the first explosion. I don't even think this was the main explosion, but the first explosion at Hallis Hall. Shane Waldron out as offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. A surprise, actually. I'll get into why I think it's a surprise, but Shane Waldron is out as Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, and it appears Thomas Brown is in. We are going to talk about it. We are going to talk about what's going on at Hallis Hall with Danny Parkins, of course, formerly of The Score, now of FS1 with the Breakfast Ball. Danny's going to be by here in just a little bit, but let's dive in to Shane Waldron. Why bury the lead? We've talked about the Patriots game. You know, everyone has. Bear and Balance, they talked about it. They talked about what a disaster it is. The post-game show talked about what a disaster it is. ESPN 1000 talked about the disaster. Everyone has talked about the disaster. The Score has talked about the disaster. So we don't need to focus on the disaster. I'll talk about it in bits and pieces here as we move forward. But let's talk about the big picture of the Chicago Bears, because that's what really matters here. And that's why I like to do this podcast in the middle of the week. I like to do this podcast because, yes, sometimes you need to talk about the game upcoming. Sometimes you need to reflect on some of the things that happened the previous week. But a lot of times, middle of the week is the really good time to talk big picture with this team. And that's what I want to do right here. And obviously, let's talk about this with Shane Waldron first. And here's the first question. Will this really accomplish anything? That's what we have to ask ourselves as fans, because there's an underlying issue here that goes beyond Shane Waldron. And first of all, let me say why I'm surprised is what I talked about on my Bears Bite earlier in the week, and that is optics. Optics for Matt Eberflus. Now, maybe Matt Eberflus didn't have a choice. Obviously, Eberflus was discussing with his coaching staff, with Ryan Poles, and I would assume Kevin Warren, maybe George McCaskey. Can they demote Shane Waldron from play calling duties, or do they have to fire him completely? Obviously, the decision in the end was fire him completely. I know Matt Eberflus said in his press conference on Monday that the decision is his and his alone. It's not. That was a group decision, because that's not a decision about how to fix the Bears. This is a Caleb Williams decision, and don't think it's anything of the sort otherwise. If the Bears offense was kind of broken, but Caleb Williams was still making positive, progressive steps, this wouldn't have happened. This has happened because Caleb Williams has wildly regressed in 3 games versus where he was against Carolina and Jacksonville. And I don't want to hear bad defenses were the reason why. If you watch those games, you understood that Caleb Williams was progressing in the right direction. But things have taken a wild step backwards in terms of that progression. And we will talk about it as to what's going on there. So what is this going to accomplish with Shane Waldron? Because Shane Waldron, the offense he ran in Seattle is not the offense we're seeing here in Chicago. Now, the run game is going to be different because Chris Morgan is involved there. And that was an odd decision to try and marry offensive coordinator with an offensive line coach. We've talked about that really shouldn't, even when Waldron was hired, that was going to be an odd fit, but the Bears chose to do it because the Bears never choose to do anything the right way. But putting that aside, the bigger issue here is that Shane Waldron likes to stretch a defense. And that's why I thought he was, in terms of, is he perfect? No, because you wanted that offensive-minded head coach. But in terms of what was available in the spring, I thought Shane Waldron was the best hire, because Shane Waldron likes a quarterback to operate in structure, which is what Caleb Williams said he wanted, which is what we know he needed to improve upon. So that made a lot of sense. But at the same time, Shane Waldron likes to take deep shots. Shane Waldron likes to stretch a defense. Shane Waldron likes a guy like DK Metcalf that you can toss a 50-50 ball to, Rome Odunze, and have your offensive player come down with the football. That's what Shane Waldron likes to do. But we haven't seen that hardly at all, and we certainly haven't seen that the last few weeks. So when you fire an offensive coordinator who absolutely needed to be fired, don't think I'm defending Shane Waldron here. He needed to be fired because his offense was broken. But when you look at the underlying issue as to why is Caleb Williams failing right now and what is going on with the offense, do you think the offense's issue is that they aren't hitting their deep shots and not stretching a defense and not doing the things that Shane Waldron typically likes to do? Or do you think that perhaps a defensive-minded head coach who actually told his previous quarterback 2-0-0, 2 touchdowns, 0 turnovers, 0 sacks is the way he should operate, where if we're being honest, 1-0-0 is really what he wanted. But when you've got a guy like Justin Fields, you're going to tell him 2-0-0 because otherwise you're going to understand that Justin Fields understands that he's getting neutered, which is what happened in Pittsburgh, by the way. But at the same time, do you want a defensive-minded head coach who that's his attitude? Or is it possible that Shane Waldron, if you asked him, maybe Shane Waldron would have said the Chicago, right? 3-1-2. I want 3 touchdowns, 1 turnover because I want you taking chances and 2 sacks as long as they're meaningful sacks. What I mean by meaningful sacks, and I bring up this Joe Burrow quote because I think it's the perfect quote about sacks. A sack on 2nd and 6 that drops you to 3rd and 13 is a crippling sack. A sack on 3rd and 7 when you're trying to make a play past the sticks and you're holding onto the ball too long because your first reads aren't there and you get sacked and it ends up being 4th and 13, that's not a meaningful sack. Those sacks are kind of okay because your quarterback is trying to make a play. Joe Burrow brought that up. I think it's a great point that I honestly, while you think about it, I never really thought about it in those terms, that a sack on 3rd and 8 because you're trying to see if your playmaker can get open doesn't impact the punt really at all. But a sack on 2nd and 6 cripples the drive. So that's where I sit there and say 3-1-2, where maybe Caleb's trying to make a play out of nothing. Caleb's trying to see if he can get that first down on a critical 3rd down. Those sacks are okay. A turnover because you're throwing intermediate middle of the field or deep left, deep right is okay from time to time from a rookie quarterback. So why do you want to take the Caleb Williams out of Caleb Williams? And Daniel Jeremiah said it on the Move the Sticks podcast. He said, Caleb Williams is playing tentative, which we all see. Caleb Williams is playing very tentative football right now, and it looks like he is afraid to make a mistake. He is afraid to turn the ball over. He's not throwing it the way he should. He's not being decisive the way he should. And Daniel Jeremiah said it. It's almost like it's been beaten out of him. So when you sit there and you think about the offense being broken, is it broken because Shane Waldron is a bad offensive coordinator, or is it broken because the overlying concepts that Matt Eberflus wants his offense to be, which we saw for the previous 2 years and hope that with a different quarterback it would change, and it doesn't look like it has? What is the overlying issue here? And the overlying issue is Matt Eberflus for the reasons I talked about. It's philosophical. There's other issues with Eberflus that we're going to discuss here. But right now we're going to talk offensively, the philosophical issues of what he wants this offense to be. You can invest in this offense and get the number 1 overall pick and the number 9 overall pick and trade the number 1 pick for DJ Moore and spend $23 million on Keenan Allen and re-sign Cole Kmet and do all these things to have great offensive talent on that side of the football. But if you tell them that you just want mistake-free game management style football where you're happy with field goals and punts that put the team back inside the 10, that sucks. That sucks as a football concept. That sucks unless it's 1992, and it ain't 1992, and it hasn't been for 32 years. So if we could get our heads out of our collective asses at Hallis Hall and maybe think like a modern offense that should take more chances and think about it when the ball's at the 50-yard line, that this is 4-down territory. And not only 4-down territory when you're down 2 scores with 5 minutes to go. Can we actually think analytically? Can we think offensive minded? Can we be on the attack instead of on the defense and trying to put teams on their heels and go for the throat and do the things you need to do to be successful championship caliber football teams? Can we change that mindset at Hallis Hall? Because Matt Eberflus is not that mindset. Matt Eberflus is mistake-free football, and let's have the defense win, and let's get out of here with a 20-13 win. That's the way Matt Eberflus wants to play, and that is not the way that this team should be played if you are going to structure it around a number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams. It's a bunch of BS, and it is frustrating that the Chicago Bears are here. So now they turn to Thomas Brown, who, if we talk about it with people around the league, Thomas Brown is very well respected by coaches and by players. Now, he has been a play caller before. He was a play caller with the Carolina Panthers, and it did not go well. But it also did not go well because he had Bryce Young, and he didn't have much talent around Bryce Young. We laugh about how bad the situation is in Carolina, and we defend Frank Reich for not having any chance to be successful in that situation. So I think we have to say the same thing for Thomas Brown. Maybe Thomas Brown is a gem and he is going to unlock Caleb Williams and things are going to be much better the back half of the season. It's obviously wait and see. You know, I was very glad Thomas Brown joined this staff, but I'm also curious to see what he's going to do. What immediate things can Thomas Brown do to make this offense more functional, not soon, but this week against the Green Bay Packers, because it is a broken offense for multiple reasons. So let's talk about the broken offense here for a minute before we get into some player effort and some things going on the player side. And the bottom line here is this offensive line and Chris Morgan is a problem. And it's a Ryan Poles problem. I'm not defending Ryan Poles, but the bottom line here is why is this offensive line so bad? All right. When you look at the New England Patriots offensive line, that offensive line was a bunch of guys they picked up off of practice squads, unsigned free agents, UDFAs. They didn't have a good offensive line to begin with. They had it got banged up, and they threw this group out there. And the group at least functionally kept Drake May alive. Why can't a Chicago Bears offensive line that, as banged up as it was, I would say the Bears offensive line on Sunday was more talented than the Patriots offensive line. That's how bad, guys. That's how bad that Patriots offensive line was. All right. Keep that in perspective. Go look up the starting offensive line. I'm not going to do it here, but go look up the starting offensive line and look at all the players and where they came from and how much that team had played together. Why can the Patriots scheme things up properly to at least give Drake May 3 seconds and the Bears can't? When we look at this, and yeah, Tevin Jenkins only played half the game, not even, but Tevin Jenkins is a functional player. Larry Borum is a functional swing tackle. Matt Pryor is a functional offensive lineman. Ryan Bates is a functional player. Like Coleman Shelton was pretty good with the Rams last year and has not been as good this year. Doug Kramer, look, shouldn't be playing. The Nate Davis situation is a debacle. It's been a debacle. We don't need to go into it. You know, bad back, go home. You're not playing. So now Doug Kramer's got to play. And Doug Kramer's not a guard. And look, I've criticized Doug Kramer. Some of you think unfairly criticized Doug Kramer. I'm just going by what I see on the tape. And what I see on the tape is not an NFL offensive lineman. Hey, great. You had some fun at fullback before you fumbled and that whole idea just blew up in everyone's faces. Not your fault, Doug. You should never have gotten the ball in that situation. But until that moment, yeah, we had some fun with you at fullback. But that's what it is. Doug Kramer is not a guy. Doug Kramer is not a building block. And I think the Bears experiment there needs to end. But the bottom line here is, for the most part, the offensive line talent should still be functional to be 20 to 25 in the league. which isn't good. And I'm not trying to defend it, but it shouldn't be 9 sacks bad. And Chris Morgan is making it 9 sacks bad. Why is there no cohesive? Why can they still not pick up a blitz? How has that not changed? How do they keep getting confused by twists? How has that not changed? That is coaching. That is 100% coaching, and Chris Morgan continues to fail at it. So why last year Matt Eberflus is like, Chris Morgan's the guy we got to keep. Get rid of everyone else except Chris Morgan. I mean, that should have been alarm bell number one. So when we sit here and see a broken offensive line, a quarterback who has been told to never make a mistake, he hasn't thrown an interception in weeks. I mean, since his 2-interception game against the Colts, he's thrown 1 interception, and it was the one bad throw to DJ Moore. That's it. He's not throwing interceptions, but now he's not throwing touchdown passes because he is afraid to throw the football. The gunslinging Caleb Williams is now afraid to throw the football, and he wasn't against Jacksonville and Carolina. So what happened? What crap did the Bears beat into him during the bye? Like, okay, you're doing good now, so let's make sure you never make a mistake again. Like, what kind of concept is this for a rookie quarterback to basically take away the intermediate part of the field, the deep part of the field, for a guy who likes to make plays? And I understand he can't chuck it up there every time and that he's got to find his moments. And I thought that's what Shane Waldron was trying to teach him early on. But when you see it against Carolina and Jacksonville and you see this massive regression, is it that he's not trusting his offensive line? Are the players' efforts at receiver not there? We're going to get into that in a minute. Like, it's not one issue to point at and say, all right, now it's fixed. Shane Waldron being fired isn't the problem. He's a problem in an overlying massive problem. So I don't think this is suddenly going to turn things around for the Chicago Bears. All I think this is the first explosion into what is the end of Matt Eberflus with the Bears, which again is frustrating because we all knew, all of us knew it should have ended in January, and here we are 10 months later, and it's a debacle. It is an absolute inferno at Hallis Hall, and it is because Matt Eberflus is still here. And now you've got Jalen Johnson going on the score and saying player effort isn't there. Well, we hear you loud and clear, Jalen Johnson, because we see it out there too. We know that the player effort isn't there. We 100% know the player effort isn't there. And you know where the player effort isn't? Like, there's players on offense. We're going to talk about that in a second. But it's also players on defense. And I'm going to bring him up because a couple people asked about this, and that is Tyreek Stevenson. Tyreek Stevenson is a massive problem. Can Tyreek Stevenson get his head back in this season? I sure hope so. Because the Tyreek Stevenson before the bye and after the bye is a totally different player. Tyreek Stevenson before the bye, and I tweeted these stats out at Bill T. Zimmerman. 18 for 35, 235 yards. This is him in coverage. 6.7 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and a 70.5 passer rating against. Those numbers included him really struggling against Nico Collins, which, by the way, that's okay. A second-year corner struggling against one of the top receivers in the league, that's going to happen. No one thinks Tyreek Stevenson needs to be perfect. But when we see Tyreek Stevenson on the other side of the bye and what he's become, which is 11 for 19, 185 yards, 9.8 yards an attempt, a full 3 yards up on the attempt. He's given up 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and his passer rating against is 126. That's not the same player. And to me, when I see what I see from Tyreek Stevenson out there, it looks like effort to me. And I hate calling out players' effort. But when it's on the field and you don't see players hustling as much as they should, when you see players not with their heads in the games like they were against the against the Washington Commanders, when you see that, you have to call it out. And when we get to the offensive side of the ball, and I'm going to leave his name out because I have been told by the person to leave his name out. And I think you're all going to know the name by just talking about this. But there is a player on offense that's causing problems. major problems in the locker room. And he isn't going anywhere for a long time, and he's been paid plenty of money. And Sylvie actually tweeted out, ESPN's Mark Silverman tweeted it out, that multiple players have asked for Shane Waldron to be fired and for Tyson Bagent to start. And I don't know about the multiple players, but I do know there is one player. And I also believe that that player asked for a trade a couple weeks ago. Like, he is a malcontent on this offense. He is like, there is a major problem. His effort is bad. He is causing massive problems to this offense. And that's all I'm going to say about it for right now. But if more stuff gets leaked out as we move forward here, that's fine. But there is a problem on offense. And I'm shocked. I am shocked that this player is acting the way he is. I did not think this player was who he is, but apparently he is. So when we have players that are acting like that openly, and then making weak excuses as to why they're playing the way they're playing, just nonsense to me. Disappointing that a team leader would be this kind of a situation to the locker room. I am stunned. I am shocked. And most importantly, I am disappointed that this is the situation the Chicago Bears are in, because they never should have been in this situation. This was a situation where they should have been, had team leaders and veterans that should be helping this team along, and they are instead dropping, M80s in the locker room and blowing crap up. It's a problem. And now we have an issue going into a game with a team that tends to really expose the problems that the Chicago Bears have, and that is the Green Bay Packers. And this, to me, and I'm not expecting it to get this ugly. And in fact, if you talk to the smart gamblers, they're all piling on the Bears at +6 or +6.5. But the Packers tend to embarrass the Bears when the opportunity is there to do it. And the one that stands out the most is the Mark Trestman game on Sunday Night Football, the year he got fired. 42-0 at halftime. That's what this Packers game feels like to me. Now, it's at home. It's not on Sunday Night Football. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I don't see any way, even with Thomas Brown, unless the Thomas Brown offense is a 180 from where it's been the last 3 weeks. And it is, wow, what a spark, what a change. Unless we see something like that, and it's only a modicum of improvement, I don't see how the Bears keep this within like 3 touchdowns. Like, if you're a gambler, I would bet alt lines. I would bet the Packers -2 touchdowns here. Like, I think there's no reason to think the Bears are going to compete with Green Bay in this game. The Packers are better coached. They have more talent, more experience, and just better scheme, better everything. There is not one thing the Bears are better at other than causing drama. And the Packers have their fair share of drama. They just have a coach that knows how to deal with it. The Bears don't have a coach. The Bears have a clown. And that's where we are with the Chicago Bears. With all the hope, and that's where this is really scary, guys. With all the hope that we had as a fan base all spring, it comes crashing down because the GM makes one wrong decision. And that's where I'm going to finish up the monologue here before we get to Danny Parkins. Ryan Poles. Do you like Ryan Poles as a general manager? I put out a poll. Should they just fire Flus or should they fire both of them? And it was 55-45. 55 of you want to keep Ryan Poles. And the question is, does Ryan Poles really deserve another shot at a head coach? Even if he only had Dan Quinn, Matt Eberflus, and Jim Caldwell. Those were the only 3 he had to pick from. By the way, how's Dan Quinn doing? So even if that was the case, he made the wrong call. So even if that's the situation, do you give Ryan Poles another shot at a head coach? Because right now, not only, if he had a chance to get rid of him, we don't know for certain. There could have been handcuffs, especially if this was a 5-year deal. The Bears didn't want to eat 3 years of a contract. It's possible. But if he had a chance to get rid of the coach and he doubled down and said, Matt Eberflus is my guy, you have to question who Ryan Poles is as a general manager, who made the steal of the century with the trade with the Carolina Panthers. And you can't take that away from him. He does get credit for that. But other than that move, which of course has landed DJ Moore, Tyreek Stevenson, Torrey Taylor, Caleb Williams, all this talent, Darnell Wright, all this talent that is the potential foundation that he got in one trade. Other than that, where are you that impressed with what he's done? Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker were very good picks, but also the type of positions that have a very high hit rate in the second round. You take a safety in the second round, he should hit. You take a nickel corner in the second round, he should hit. Braxton Jones, nice pick, but Braxton Jones is now showing that he is not a difference maker. He's not a left tackle who can be here for 10 years. Velus Jones was a disaster. He's gone. Like, we look at his drafts. They're pretty good. They're not amazing. Zach Pickens isn't it, right? Like, they're not amazing. Darnell Wright is a good player, but he is not developing at the rate. Now, maybe it's Chris Morgan's fault, but he is not developing at the rate we would have hoped that he would develop. So when we look at his drafts, they're pretty good. They're not home runs. And then when we look at his free agent signings, Montez Sweat, good. Chase Claypool, absolute debacle. He lit a second-round pick on fire. Kevin Byard has been good. Jonathan Owens was cheap, but he doesn't see the field anymore. Tremaine Edmonds has been better this year, did not live up to his expectations last year. DeMarcus Walker has been okay. Nate Davis has been a debacle. Gerald Everett has been a debacle. Like, there are a lot of free agent signings that didn't quite work out. So when we look at Ryan Poles, are we 100% confident as a fan base that he's the guy for this job? And if you still are, I'm not saying he needs to be fired, but I certainly think the seat needs to be warm, because there are plenty of things to question about Ryan Poles as well, including if he can find the right coach for this team and specifically for Caleb Williams moving forward. Because there's no chance when you are on your third offensive coordinator in year 3, you do not get to stay as head coach of the Chicago Bears. Even the Bears understand that. Matt Eberflus is a dead coach walking. It's only a matter of time as to when. And if the philosophy doesn't change with Thomas Brown in there, if Matt Eberflus doesn't take the reins off of Caleb Williams and let Caleb be Caleb, then the decision, I don't care if they've never done it in 105 years, the decision has to come soon. All right, welcome back into the podcast. Excited to talk to this man. And we scheduled this a few weeks ago when the Bears were 4-2. And I was sitting there going, the Bears are going to be 6-3, maybe 7-2. Packers week. This is going to be a fun, exciting conversation. But instead, it's what we do every year, and that's bitch about this organization and their continued failure to do anything right. He is Danny Parkins, of course, Breakfast Ball on FS1 with Mark Schlereth and Craig Carton, and you get them at Danny Parkins. Make sure you subscribe to the Breakfast Ball YouTube page so you can check them out even when they are not live on FS1. And Danny joins me now. Danny, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Bill, good to be back, man. It's been too long, and there's too much Bears to banter about, so we got a lot to get into.
We do, and let's just, I mean, obviously we'll talk about the Patriots game. We'll talk about this, impending Packers disaster coming up. But obviously we got to dive into the coaching here, because this has been trending the wrong way now for 3 consecutive weeks, and things are falling apart. The players are pissed, and it's clearly, I don't know if this is the bottom. The Packers, a lot of times, the 42-0 halftime Mark Trestman year, they provide the bottom a lot, and this is coming at a bad time. Where are you exactly with Matt Eberflus and this coaching staff?
Well, I think that the thing that's scary is that it feels like it's history repeating itself, and that this is heading in a direction of an offseason coaching change, which would then be exactly what happened with Mitch Trubisky when it was John Fox to Matt Nagy, and then exactly like what happened with Justin Fields when it was Matt Nagy to Matt Eberflus. So it feels like that's where it's going. We know they've never done a coaching change in season. It doesn't seem like Kevin Warren is going to change that. And it's just really dispiriting, because can you overcome that? Sure. Of course, like it can be overcome, but there's no denying that it sets back the development of a young quarterback. and it makes it less likely that you will be able to take full advantage of the greatest advantage in pro sports, which is a great rookie quarterback on a rookie contract. So they are stunting Caleb Williams' development, and it feels inevitable that there will be another regime change with Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron. I think it'll stop short of Ryan Poles at this moment. But you say like the bottom, I mean, Bill, are the Bears going to win another game?
Doesn't feel like it right now. I mean, I'm guessing they'll win one, maybe two,
right?
Because just by default it'll happen. But
right, but you don't feel good about it. You don't really, they obviously the schedule the rest of the way is all the division games, Seattle and San Francisco. They looked really good against Carolina, Jacksonville, and the Rams, who at the time were the three worst pass defenses in the NFL. So, I mean, literally 30th, 31st, and 32nd. So they need to fix this thing fast. And I, along with many other people, said this was the best situation that a rookie quarterback had ever walked into. And I actually think empirically it was true, given that they were a 7-win team and the guys on the roster. This is staggering because people could be like, oh, you should have expected it. Oh, you drafted the wrong guy. Man, DJ Moore has been good with Kyle Allen and Teddy Bridgewater and everybody he's ever played with in 8 years. Literally everyone. Keenan Allen was awesome last year. Like, you're telling me that those guys just stopped being great? I refuse to believe that. So I do think the scheme is broken, and we can talk about any of the specifics. I don't think it's just on Shane Waldron, but I think that's a good place to start.
All right, and before we get into trying to fix this and what this season is going to look like moving forward, I think we need to rewind back to January, because this was something that I talked a lot about on my podcast. I know you talked about it a lot on your show on The Score, and that was lining up head coach, and quarterback, and they had the opportunity to do that, and they didn't do it. And it's frustrating, Danny, when media and fans and like everyone understands the value of that. And Kevin Warren is here and Ryan Poles is here. And this isn't, Ryan Poles keeps saying this isn't the same regime as past regimes. We're here to break curses and break the cycles, and saying all the right things. But it's Groundhog Day again. And it, with the opportunity that is Caleb Williams, it really, for me, it's even more of a pending sense of dread, because I feel like if they screw this one up, they will never get it right.
Listen, I don't believe that laundry is cursed. I think that I always say the Bengals were the Bungles until they got Joe Burrow, or the Chiefs hadn't won a single regular season game, not playoff game, just any game with a quarterback that they had drafted between Todd Blackledge and Patrick Mahomes. Every win was Alex Smith or Elvis Gerback or, Joe Montana or Trent Green, like quarterbacks that other franchises had first. And then they draft Pat Mahomes, and it's the greatest draft pick in the history of the sport. So I don't, forever is a long time. Like I do still believe that someday they'll get it right. And it might take luck. And by the way, I still think Caleb Williams is the right guy to do it. I still think that he is special and is going to be great. But to go back to that time in the offseason when I was on the radio saying you've got to fire Matt Eberflus, I have a bias towards offensive coaches. I fully admit that. If you're the Dallas Cowboys and you fire Mike McCarthy, or you don't bring back Mike McCarthy because technically his contract will just expire at the end of the season, and you want to make the argument that they can hire Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick, like, fine. They've got a quarterback who was second in the NFL in MVP last year and is in his early 30s. Like, that's reasonable. But if you are trying to give stability to a young quarterback who is unproven, like all rookie quarterbacks are by definition, young and unproven, it strikes me as crazy to say that the best possible person you could pair him with is Matt Eberflus. And even though I liked Shane Waldron under the premise of you had to hire him under Matt Eberflus, what I said at the time was, if you fired Eberflus, you would be able to hire an offensive mind who is qualified to be a head coach. If you keep Eberflus, you are limiting your talent pool of offensive coordinators to only guys who are ready to be offensive coordinator. So it takes you out of Ben Johnson. It takes you out of Jim Harbaugh. It takes you out of anyone else who was ready to be a head coach in the last cycle. And Matt Eberflus had not proven that he was a difference maker, either as a leader or, frankly, as a defensive mind. Everyone wants to talk about how great the defense was. It improved after they got Montez Sweat, and they beat Aiden O'Connell and Bryce Young and Josh Dobbs and Jared Goff once and Taylor Heineke. Like, they were not proven to be some sort of excellent schematic advantage. Like, we felt like, oh, well, for the next 10 years with Matt Eberflus, they'll have a top 5 defense because they've got this revolutionary mind at the position. He hadn't even given us any reason to believe that. So I hated the fact that they brought him back in the first place. And it's just maddening, man, that we're going here. And then I know I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But, well, no, listen, like, it's insular because, like, would they have ever hired Jim Harbaugh? Doesn't feel like it. Would they have given Ben Johnson $15 million a year? Easy to doubt it when Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron are all represented by Trace Armstrong, former Bear, as their agent. It's like, what are we doing? Why are we? It's so insular and it's so small-minded, and it's not going out and getting the best and the brightest that it really makes you disenfranchised into believing that, like, if they do get it right, it will be in spite of the Bears, not because of the Bears.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I know exactly where you're coming from. So, but before I pivot back to this season, let me just ask you one other thing and tell me, does this concern you, or you have confidence in Caleb Williams so it doesn't? So I did some research last week about coaching stability for young quarterbacks, and I took the 25 best quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era, and you can say, what happened with Roger Staubach and Terry Bradshaw doesn't matter to Caleb Williams. It's a totally different era, and that's fair. But I also looked at the top 10 quarterbacks, and again, it's subjective, it's my thoughts, but the top 10 quarterbacks in the league currently, and said, how many of them had coaching stability early on? And if Caleb Williams becomes great, and when I say great, I said top 25 quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era level great, he would become the first one that had a coaching change after year one. The first one who played right away. That I should put that in. Played right away, coaching change after year one. He would be the first one. Of the top 10 quarterbacks right now that fit that mold, you know, I put Jared Goff in the top 10. I know he just had 5 interceptions, but he took years to figure it out. The only one that really fits the mold of having a coaching change after year one and continuing to play well is Justin Herbert. So when I tell you that coaching stability is critical and the Bears potentially, you know, it's the right call. I'm not trying to you know, honk for Eberflus to stay. Obviously, I wanted him gone after last season. Does that concern you that Caleb Williams would have to literally be the first quarterback that became great that dealt with a coaching change that early in his career?
Yeah, of course it concerns me. Yes, of course. Like, that's what, yes, that's great. I mean, it's great data. I don't think it's a compelling enough reason to then say, well, then you got to just keep Eberflus.
Agreed. Totally agree.
And, you know, Josh Lucas, I think, has been an interesting resource to Bears fans the last couple of years. And, you know, him and I were talking about Herbert on the old show. And, you know, he was a guy, he was like, listen, like, if you're that guy, you'll overcome it. Like, you'll supersede it. And Herbert was the example that I gave that he agreed with. It was basically like, if you are truly special, you'll show it. But what have the Chargers done with Herbert? They've won nothing, and they wasted his rookie contract. Like, I'd still be thrilled if Caleb Williams became Justin Herbert. I'd be thrilled. I think he's a special quarterback that will win big with Harbaugh. That's been in a tough situation because of injury luck, coaching change, playing in the same division as Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, so peaking out at a wild card, you know, and some of his own shortcomings, right? He had there's one playoff game that he had. It was a terrible collapse. Like, he's He hasn't been perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm still very, very bullish on what Justin Herbert will do in his NFL career. But yeah, it's of course concerning, but I don't think, if you think that it's over with Eberflus, just rip off the Band-Aid and start over, because I'd rather do it after year 1 than after year 2 or year 3.
Yeah, I completely agree there. So let's talk about this coaching staff, and let's talk about Shane Waldron here. At the time of this recording, Matt Eberflus has made no decisions. Maybe he has. He refused to support Shane Waldron, but he said no decisions are being made. So I think at this point, it's pretty clear there's going to be a change there. Whether Shane Waldron loses his job, or just gets stripped of play calling duties, I have a feeling it'll be the latter, and Thomas Brown will get the opportunity, being he has experience. But when I'm, looking at the all-22 myself and seeing what I'm seeing, and that's being backed up by Kurt Warner, Tim Jenkins, JT O'Sullivan, all these guys that just grind tape, Dan Orlovsky, about the passing, players being bunched up, receivers being bunched up, where of course they're not getting open, and receivers not selling routes, and just poor concepts everywhere, where Tim Jenkins literally said you can't even evaluate Caleb Williams right now. Not that he's playing well, but you can't even tell how he's playing because the offense is so broken. I know you said it's not all Shane Waldron's fault. So where are you on this offense? And yes, they were bad defenses, but an offense that looked elite, against Carolina and against Jacksonville, compared to where they are now, which is a broken offense that doesn't even look professional.
Yeah, I think that obviously a big piece of it was bad defenses. Some of this doesn't make any sense. Like you shouldn't look less competent coming out of a bye. That doesn't make any, just in terms of operation. You could play better defenses, but you should not look sloppier coming out of a bye, which is what they have. I think the offensive line has obviously been a huge problem. I don't regret the Rome Odunze pick. I still think logically it made a lot of sense, but it's very clear that this team needs to make significant investment in the offensive line for Caleb Williams this offseason. Keenan Allen won't be back, and they will use some of that money and some of their draft picks, their first-round pick, the Panthers' second-round pick, their second-round pick. It wouldn't shock me if 2 of their top 3 picks were offensive linemen going forward, because I do think that is, Arizona gets a pressure rate on the season at 26%. Against the Bears, they got pressure on 46% of Caleb's dropbacks. That's making a bad pass rush elite. Against the Patriots, the guy got hit 13 times and was sacked 9 times. That's criminal. So I think that the protection has been a huge piece of this. I think, a few weeks ago, average depth of route for Keenan Allen was deeper than at any point in his entire career. How does that make any sense?
Right.
Like he's one of the great short area quickness, instant open wide receivers we've ever seen. Like the guy has been the most consistent player arguably in the NFL. Like he's been in the very, very short list of Keenan Allen does this well. You bring him to Chicago, have him keep doing this, like have him keep doing what he's always done. So I think that they have complicated things early in the season with the plays not being scripted, early in the season with Gerald Everett out snapping Cole Kmet. Like it's been such a avalanche of errors and incompetence. And again, it's not that Caleb hasn't held onto the ball too long, hasn't been big game hunting too much. Like he wears some of it, but when he's under pressure, when he shouldn't be under pressure, when wide receivers are not doing what they have done successfully at every other stop in their career, when the best players aren't playing, when you're not scripting the plays, when he's on the list of problems, but he's not near the top of the list of problems because the guy's 9 damn games into his NFL life. Shane Waldron's supposed to know better.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And beyond Waldron, I got to ask you about Chris Morgan, because you bring up the offensive line. And yes, the offensive line isn't working well at all, clearly, on multiple levels.
Right, they've been bad and they've been injured. It's a bad combination.
Right, it's a bad combination, but this is where I bring up Chris Morgan, because this is the one guy that Matt Eberflus said, no, we got to keep this guy on the offensive staff. Got to keep Chris Morgan. And when I'm looking around the league and seeing teams play the Bears that have injuries all over their offensive line,
Yeah.
but they continue to at least be serviceable. And that's the thing with the Bears is, and I get it right now. Like when I looked at that offensive line that was starting, I'm not sitting here and pretending that it was great. And obviously Tevin Jenkins goes down and misses the rest of the game. But like, it wasn't the worst offensive line the Bears have ever put out there. It wasn't good, but you would expect it to at least, if there was some level of cohesion and some level of an offensive, a blocking plan that they could follow, that it could have been better. And you see, like, the Patriots are playing basically UDFAs and guys they picked up off the scrap heap right now, and they protected Drake May better than the Bears protected Caleb Williams. And I'm not saying it's good talent that the Bears had out there yesterday, but you could argue the Bears offensive line yesterday had more talent than the Patriots offensive line. That's the level they were playing at, but the Patriots offensive line had a better plan to stop the Bears pass rush. So when I sit here and see, yes, they're injured, and yes, they don't have a lot of high-end talent, and I get all that, but can you be the 20th best offensive line in the league? I don't think that's asking for that much, and they've been far, far from it, Danny.
I remember Olin Kreutz was appalled when Chris Morgan came back, not because it was an anti-Chris Morgan thing, but that it was, how can you hire Shane Waldron and force him to have someone else's offensive line coach? That was the thing that it blew Olin's mind. He was like, that relationship has to be one of complete trust and complete alignment, because there are obviously different blocking schemes and different priorities and different tendencies and different timings. And I'm not going to pretend to understand all of the intricacies of it, but he was like, if your offensive coordinator is coming in and he can't even pick his O-line coach, what are we doing here? And listen, I respect your football acumen. You know the Bears as well as anybody. We knew the offensive line was not good coming into the season, right? Just in terms of they were young and they hadn't invested a ton in it. Man, Braxton Jones was out. Darnell Wright was out. Tevin Jenkins, we would have all said, right, that those were the three best offensive linemen coming into the year.
Yeah.
On a offensive line that we were hoping would be average at best, right? So if we were hoping they were going to be the 16th best offensive line in football, and 3 of their 5 were out, including the left side of the offensive line, your quarterback's blind side, and both tackles, that's got to be a bottom 5 offensive line in the league, just on sheer talent. So I think that injuries are they're not the total explanation of it. Every team is injured, but in the offseason, a lot of people thought, and I can't even let myself into this, like, I wanted them to upgrade at center like everybody else, but my point was, like, you can't upgrade everywhere. You need another pass rusher. You need another receiver. You have a top 10 pick. You're going to not upgrade everywhere. They didn't upgrade at offensive line in any meaningful way, and then they got hurt. So Chris Morgan, you want to throw some arrows or sling some arrows at him, I have no problem with it. But I just think they didn't invest in that offensive line, and then the guys who are supposed to be good got hurt, and you have a coach who seemingly doesn't understand his personnel, and we're witnessing a disaster that's making bad defenses look good and good defenses look like the 85 Bears. Yeah.
All right. And last thing I got to ask you, Danny, I got to ask you a little bit more about Matt Eberflus here and what has been going on here, because look, we bad ending last year with the Green Bay game and things kind of falling apart. We know the bad losses to Cleveland and Detroit. We know all that. Yep. And then, he gets the glow up in March, and suddenly everyone seems to be on Team Eberflus. And I'm kind of sitting there going, I don't think the haircut made him a better coach. Let's wait and see here. And I was hoping, once they made the decision to keep him, I was hoping he was going to figure it out, because I figured that's going to be the best thing for the Bears moving forward. But we're sitting here, and, it can be all smiles when you slaughter Carolina and slaughter Jacksonville. But, you see what a coach is when he deals with adversity. And anytime adversity has popped up for Eberflus, it has not looked good. And obviously now we're sitting here, and it couldn't get worse than it is right now. The players are clearly pissed. They're talking to the media. They know the situation here. Kevin Byard refuses to say if Matt Eberflus has lost the locker room or not. It's a problem. So let me ask you, as a, with this franchise that has never let a coach go in the middle of the season, do you think, and again, I don't think this is going to be fixing the Bears to make the playoffs this year. This is just trying to make them look like a professional football team again. Do you think if things continue to go south for another game or two, that this organization might actually consider making a change, and whether it be Richard Hightower or whoever being interim head coach? Is that something that you, Danny Parkins, media member, would want to see if this doesn't improve? And do you think the Bears would actually consider doing it?
Well, obviously, I would want them to do it. Do I think they would consider it? Man, the Bears are a pretty old franchise, and they've never done it. So I have no reason to believe that they will. I guess it would go to Kevin Warren's credit if they did it. But no, man, I don't have a lot of faith that it'll happen in season, despite how ugly this is going to get. Because, and by the way, like, Ryan Poles is not dumb. Like, he's a smart guy. He knows how bad that would look for him. And not that you do it because of optics, but because, like, it's not like he didn't consider firing Matt Eberflus this past offseason. Like, he truly, genuinely believed that bringing back Matt Eberflus was a no-brainer in the best interest of the Bears. So reversing that after 9 games, when the defense has been better than the offense, would be crazy. Now, I don't think that Matt Eberflus is going to get a third offensive coordinator. I don't think he's going to get Luke Getsy, Shane Waldron, and then another guy. So this is over. It's over. It's just a matter of when it ends. Bears unlock something offensively. They beat the Niners. They beat the Lions. They beat the Packers. They rally. They get to 9 wins, 10 wins. Okay, fine. We can reevaluate that, and you can play the clip of me saying it's over, and I'll look silly, and I'll be glad to be wrong. But barring the unthinkable, they're going to have to fire Shane Waldron, and no one will be able to defend giving Matt Eberflus a third offensive coordinator, so they'll fire him too. I just expect it to happen the day after the season and not the day after the Lions game.
Hey, I can't argue with you, and I think things are only getting uglier with this Packers game on the horizon, Danny. I just,
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, they have 6 division games, Seattle and San Francisco.
Seattle's the easy game. That's the easy game.
I know.
That's not an easy game.
It's certainly not a game. I mean, yeah, maybe. Listen, they beat Detroit last year. They easily could have won both those Lions games. Division games are weird. You get healthy in the secondary. You get a little healthier on the offensive line. That's fine. But it's really, really, really dispiriting. Let me just ask you quickly.
All right.
Do you have buyer's remorse on Caleb? Like, would you rather they have drafted Jaden Daniels?
No, I do not have buyer's remorse because I believe what I have seen from him, even with seeing May have success against the Bears, and obviously Daniels doing what he's doing. I think in terms of long-term success, he is the best of those 3 at the potential to operate in the pocket and operate quickly like you need to do to become an elite quarterback.
I do too. I believe in Caleb tremendously, but it's hard to ignore, man. It's hard to ignore. Like,
oh, I get it.
It is a fair question of doubt. Like, it feels to me like if Jaden was in Chicago, we would just be saying all of these things about Jaden Daniels, and that the Bears would be bearsing it up for him. Like, that's what it feels like. But they better not mess it up, man, because I think Caleb is special. I really do. I said to Kevin Clark before this Patriots game, I think he's bust-proof. Like, he might not be a Hall of Famer because he's on the Bears, but I will be floored if he doesn't get a second contract and isn't the best quarterback in Bears franchise history and all that. Like, I haven't sold a share of Caleb Williams stock, but these other dudes are looking real good, real fast. and they're distancing themselves from Caleb and the Bears. Like, he's got a lot of ground to make up.
Yeah, that I can't argue with at all. So, all right. Well, there he is, at Danny Parkins on Twitter. And, of course, the Breakfast Ball on FS1. You can catch him there every weekday morning. And make sure you subscribe to that YouTube page so you can get any push notifications for any clips or shows in full. You can watch them there as well. Danny, thanks for so much time. One of these days, we're going to do this interview, and it's going to be fun and positive. I'm sure of it. We might be old and gray, but it's going to happen.
I can't wait. You do a great show, and anytime, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right. There he is, Danny Parkins. Now, full disclosure, Danny actually recorded that interview before the Shane Waldron news, but that's why we talked more big picture with Matt Eberflus and the decision and, in January and how that impacted Caleb. So again, we thought Shane Waldron was going to keep his job and not lose it altogether, but same thing, Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator. So again, that's the peel back the curtain so you know how these podcasts are put together. But at the same time, I don't think content really changes at all. So thank you very much for Danny Parkins for joining the podcast. That was some really good stuff. And thank you to our show sponsor, of course, and that is Underdog Fantasy. What is Underdog? Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog Fantasy. Like you can do Red Zone Rush, a game you won't find anywhere else. Just pick whether or not a player will score a TD by swiping right for yes and left for no. Simple as that. Plus, your entry will be automatically boosted, and you'll get a 51% profit boost when you play. So again, Underdog's available in 33 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And if you use our promo code here, you can get $1,000 bonus cash instantly. That promo code for Second City Gridiron is CITY, CITY. Get up to $1,000 bonus cash instantly. Again, the best place to play champions is Underdog Fantasy. So sign up and deposit now with promo code CITY, CITY. Gets you up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. I like to use the Underdog Fantasy app. It's simple to use. Download it today, sign up, and bam, you're instantly playing. You'll be playing, for Thursday Night Football and for this week before you know it. So again, download the app today. Use our code CITY, CITY, gets you $1,000 bonus cash instantly. Underdog Fantasy, happy to have them as a partner on this podcast and the Second City Gridiron podcast channel. So make sure you sign up today. Now, of course, I got to give you these pieces of information. You have to be 18 or over, 19 or over in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 or over in Colorado for some games, and 21 or over in Massachusetts and Arizona. Got to be present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Now, if you're concerned with your play, it's 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, it's 1-800-NEXT-STEP. 1-800-639-8783, or you can text Next Step to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 877-8-HOPE-NY, or you can text HOPE-NY to 467-369. Again, Underdog Fantasy. Sign up today. So let's wrap up with the mailbag, and we'll talk briefly about the impending Packers debacle. So let's dive into these. Let's start with Andrew Betke at Bill T. Zimmerman. With Bears offense sputtering again and Williams already looking like a shell of his former self, especially under constant duress, do you believe the change at OC will be enough for him to correct, or are we in the early stage of a disaster? I don't think we're necessarily, if we're talking just about Caleb Williams and not this season, I don't want to say we're in the early stages of a disaster like the Bears have ruined another quarterback. But DEFCON, we need to start elevating this a couple notches. Like, we need to understand the level of concern that we should all have about possibly destroying this kid. Again, I think he's mentally tough. I think he can handle it. I think he can handle change on the fly. But this is, antennas need to be up, guys. we need to understand the level of concern we all should have here about organizational dysfunction and how it constantly breaks players and breaks quarterbacks. Like, would Mitch Trubisky have been an all-star, a Pro Bowler, if he was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, or if he was drafted into a great offensive mind like Sean McVay? Not necessarily, but would he be a better quarterback than he is? Very possible. Justin Fields, would he be a better quarterback than he is right now? It's very possible. We need to understand what the organizational dysfunction is. Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren were supposed to fix it, but again, they made the same mistake. The same mistake keeps being made, and now we're going to have to see if they get the right coach in here. And, we're hearing stuff like, it wouldn't be a Mike Vrabel or a Bill Belichick because they want too much power. That's why Jim Harbaugh never had a chance to come here. And now we're sitting here. It's Ben Johnson or bust. I mean, maybe Todd Monken can do it. He's a little older. He's not exactly going to be connected with 23-year-olds the way you kind of want. He's in his 60s. But, it's a problem. So is it an impending disaster? No. But do the antennas need to be up? Do we need to understand that this could be heading in the wrong direction quickly? Absolutely. All right, Andrew Davis. Do the Packers crush the Bears or annihilate the Bears this weekend? We'll give you a prediction here shortly, but yes. All right, T-Pags. Why does Flus have sole decision on the Shane Waldron when his seat should be just as hot? Is it a bad sign that they still really believe in him and his vision for this team? All right, well, one, I don't think it was sole decision. He said it was sole decision because that's what you're going to say publicly. And two, that's the question here with Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles is, how much do they still believe in Matt Eberflus? I tweeted it out. You find out about a coach when they're faced with adversity and how they maneuver their team through adversity. Every team faces adversity. No team, like the Kansas City Chiefs face adversity, but they continue to win football games. They got no wide receivers. They're bringing Kareem Hunt back like it's 2018, and they still win football games. Yes, because they have Patrick Mahomes, but they have great coaching and an actual great culture. The Bears say they have a great culture. Teams like the Chiefs have a great culture. Big difference. So the question is, the players don't believe in Matt Eberflus. Does Ryan Poles and does Kevin Warren? That's what we need to find out. And that we're going to probably start seeing trickling out of Hallis Hall over the next few weeks. Let's get to a couple more. Joe Tucio. Why does Poles defend Flus so much? He may be a nice guy, but he's done nothing to warrant being the head coach. And that was frustrating last year. And I mean, he continues to do it. And Ryan Poles is probably going to have to address the media at some point here in the next few weeks. And he's going to have to answer for Matt Eberflus. And he is probably going to say, he's the coach. We believe him. We support him. And if the Bears are in a mix of a 5, 6, 7 game losing streak, that's going to be a hard statement to defend. I don't know what the decision is here, but Matt Eberflus cannot return. And I know I got Bears fans going, oh, you don't know the Bears. Of course he can return. No, things have to get so bad that they know they have to make a change. That's what keeps happening here, right? Matt Nagy should have been gone, but they made the playoffs. George liked Nagy and Pace, so he kept them around. Next year was a disaster. We know Matt Eberflus should have been gone, should have lined up offensive coach, but they kept him anyway, and now this year is a disaster. John Fox, the last year was a disaster. Mark Trestman, disaster. We like disaster in Chicago. For George and this front office, it has to be so obvious that the change has to be made. And that's where we are now. So I don't think with players openly talking to the media about how much basically the coaches suck and how much the culture sucks, that they think that they can return Matt Eberflus. He's on his third offensive coordinator in year 3. This isn't going to continue. Matt Eberflus will be gone. It's a question of when and why give him a chance. You're 4-5 and you think he can still turn it around. If you're 4-7 or 4-8 or 5-9, that's it. It's over. Fire him then. You want to give him a couple more weeks with Thomas Brown to see if things get better, fine. But the decision needs to be made soon and the action needs to be done soon, because keeping him around till the end of the season is only going to negatively impact 2025. And at Twigtree10, is Ben a possibility or are we FUED? I think Ben's a possibility if the Bears and Kevin Warren are truly open to changing the way they do things. Are they willing to go out and spend for a head coach? You know, David Kaplan's arguing with me last week. They're worth $5 billion they should spend on a coach. And I agree with that statement, but I need to see it happen. Kevin Warren says he's here. They're not going to be a mom and pop organization. They're going to be a professional organization. All right. Well, then go and prove it to me, because Ben Johnson knows what Caleb Williams can be. He's worked with him, right? There's a tie there with the QB collective. If you want to be serious, go out and spend 60, 70, 80 million dollars on Ben Johnson and get his ass here and tell him it's yours. Ryan Poles is probably still going to be here. He's going to bring in the players. You're going to coach them up. You're going to make this offense hum like you did in Detroit, because we're going to give you more talent than you had in Detroit. And maybe you're going to bring Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach, and you're going to give him a promotion and make him the offensive coordinator / offensive line coach, so you can get him here and fix this offensive line. Then you can bring in all the other pieces, a pass game coordinator, whatever else you need. But you need to be a professionally run organization, and that starts with the coach. So don't pussyfoot around and get yourself another mediocre coach who's never coached before and wasn't even on most teams' radars, because that's what you want to do. Don't get a retread who can't get a job anymore because he's failed in too many spots. Go out there, get the offensive mind that everyone says is that, you know, I understand Matt Nagy was supposed to be that guy and he wasn't. Don't get cold feet. Matt Nagy didn't call plays. Ben Johnson calls plays. So go get the guy who is supposed to be the next Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan. Go get his ass, bring him to Chicago, let him teach Caleb Williams, and figure this shit out. Now, let's wrap up with this Packers game. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm just getting frustrated thinking about what's going to happen here. This is, at least it's not the 4 o'clock Eastern game. It's an early game still, but it is going to be the Tom Brady, Kevin Burkhardt game. It's going to be on in a lot of televisions across the country, and the Green Bay Packers are going to embarrass the Chicago Bears. Maybe the gamblers are right, but I don't think the gamblers understand that the Chicago Bears in the last 5 years in games in Chicago, their closest game was that pathetic 10-3 game in 2019. Every other game they've lost by 2 scores or more. Every other game. They can't compete with this team at all. Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, it doesn't matter. This team is so much better than the Chicago Bears year in and year out. There's no I came in, I'm like, they're going to split with the Packers this year. How stupid am I to think things are going to change because the Bears actually have talented players? Because they're still the frickin' Chicago Bears. And until they're not the Chicago Bears, they're going to continue to be the doormat of the NFC North, and especially for the Green Bay Packers. So why should we expect the Bears to at least be competitive and lose 20-17? There's no reason to think that. So gamblers, you're all piling on Bears +6 because of Thomas Brown. Go lose your money. All right. If I'm betting this game, I'm betting the Green Bay Packers, and I'm betting them to win by 2 touchdowns. I don't think this game is competitive at all. I think on Twitter I called it 34-9. I have no reason to change that. I will give a spark to Thomas Brown, and I'll call it 34-16. So the Bears offense looks functionally bad again. But the Bears defense, the effort isn't there right now. Tyreek Stevenson is not playing well. Jalen Johnson and Kevin Byard can't do everything themselves. I don't know if Jaquan Brisker is ever going to play again. That concussion with him is scary at this point. He's been out at this point as long, if not longer, than Tua was, and Tua got knocked unconscious in the damn game. Like Jaquan Brisker, this is his 3rd major concussion in 3 years. It's a serious situation there. So this defense, with Andrew Billings out, I expect them to start getting hurt by Matt LaFleur. I think there's going to be points scored, and I think the Packers cruise by at least 2 touchdowns in this game. That's going to do it for Bears Banter. We'll talk to you next week, everybody. Hang in there and bear down. Adios.